Been 128 days since Chinese Dr. Ai Fen, the director of the Wuhan Central Hospital's emergency unit, shared information on the internet about a patient with a SARS-like virus. Her colleague, Dr. Li Wen Liang, shared Dr. Ai's report online with medical colleagues. The next day, December 31st, regional health officials in Wuhan indicated they were treating dozens of patients with an unknown viral pneumonia. And within days, Chinese officials detained Dr. Li, 7 others, for spreading false statements on the internet. China saw then that it had an emerging public health crisis on its hands. They knew. China could have prevented the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people worldwide. China could have spared the world a descent into global economic malaise. They had a choice, but instead, China covered up the outbreak in Wuhan. Its National Health Commission ordered virus samples destroyed on January 3rd. China disappeared brave Chinese citizens who raised alarms. It deployed its propaganda organs to denounce those who politely called for simple transparency. And that brings us to today, 120 days on. China is still refusing to share the information we need to keep people safe, such as viral isolates, clinical specimens, and details about the many COVID-19 patients in December 2019, not to mention patient 0. Our truth-telling and calls for transparency aren't about politics. It's not about bullying. It's not about blame. It's about the ongoing need to save American lives. This is an ongoing threat. Today, ask medical professionals in New York City. I think they'll agree with that. We need countries to share reliable data in a timely way now and the next time that a calamity like this hits. We need reliable partners. As a result of China's choices, countries are starting to understand the risk of doing business with Chinese Communist Party and taking action to protect their people. A few examples. In recent weeks, Nigeria, Kazakhstan, and France have demarched the Chinese Communist Party ambassadors for a whole host of lies and misdeeds. Spain has returned defective test kits made in China. That country, the Czech Republic, other nations have received shoddy PPE as well. The Australians and the Swedes have called for an independent review into the outbreak. And my friend Dominic Raab has said that the United Kingdom can't go back to, quote, business as usual, end of quote, with Beijing. Even the EU's foreign affairs chief admitted that Brussels has been, quote, a little naive, end of quote, about China. I'm heartened by this newfound realism. The free nations of the world are starting to understand that China doesn't share those democratic values that we hold dear or their economic interests, and that this matters to the entire world. There's no true win-win with a communist regime unless you get to the fair terms that President Trump has talked about and the reciprocity that President Trump did in the Phase 1 trade deal. Now countries have a chance to further insist on what's right for their people. Today I want to call upon all nations, including those in Europe, to support Taiwan's participation as an observer at the World Health Assembly and in other relevant United Nations venues. I also call upon WHO Director General Tedros to invite Taiwan to observe this month's WHA, as he has the power to do and as his predecessors have done on multiple occasions.
On China, what do you mean when you say there is enormous amount of evidence that the virus is from the Wuhan lab? The reason I ask is because Army General Mark Milley said yesterday that we don't know if the virus emerged from the Wuhan lab.
So I saw General Milley's statements entirely consistent with what I think everyone in the administration has said, including President Trump. The intelligence community is still figuring out precisely where this virus began. Here's how this could get solved really quickly. The Chinese Communist Party could do what they're committed to do under their obligation to the World Health Organization, to be transparent, to be open, to do the simple things that nations all around the world do to make sure that pandemics like this don't get out of control, and in fact, importantly, stay out of control. I mentioned the number of days. This is an ongoing challenge.
In multiple interviews on May 1st, April 30th, and other days, some version of, we don't know if the virus came from inside the lab in Wuhan. And then on Sunday, You said there's enormous evidence the virus came from inside the lab.
Those are both true.
So did the intelligence change over the weekend?
Those statements are both true. They're entirely consistent. They're entirely consistent.
So
Why
then,
are you highlighting one? And let's
I've now answered this question. I think it's the 13th time. Happy to try to answer it again. I'm not sure what it is about the grammar that you can't get. We don't have certainty, and there is significant evidence that this came from the laboratory. Those statements can both be true. I've made them both. Administration officials have made them. They're all true.
The Chinese have not been forthcoming. There are many reports within there that it could have leaked from this lab. They do have a lab there. It's interesting to me, the wet markets, if the Chinese believed it came from there, why would they have opened those back up? There's so many unanswered questions and so much of the intelligence that is leading towards that it did leak from this laboratory that had really main concerns of how they practice there, not in the best instances of other labs. So there are real concerns, and we want to get to the bottom of it.
I've had that conversation with a lot of people about what I view as the greatest threat and the greatest threat actor, and I view China as the greatest threat actor right now. I mean, look at where we are with respect to COVID-19 and the role that China plays, the race to 5G, cybersecurity issues, all roads lead to China there. And so one of the priorities, highest priorities that I'll have if confirmed as DNI is to make sure, and again, my background with regard to, violent extremists, that is a generational challenge that we will continue to deal with. We may forget about them, but they don't forget about us. But I agree with you in terms of making sure, as we look at the national intelligence framework and whether we're committing enough resources to the rising power that is China. When you look at the initiatives that they have, the Belt and Road, the Made in China 2025, the all of the military civil fusion initiative, where they literally want by law Chinese companies to collect intelligence. These are all spokes of the same initiative, and that's for China to supplant us as the world's superpower and to be able to set standards around the world. And we very clearly don't want an authoritarian regime like the Chinese Communist Party setting standards in the world marketplace. And so I look forward to sitting down with you, if confirmed, about how ODNI and the other 16 elements are dedicated to the rising threat that is China, which I view as our greatest threat actor. Many of you have asked me what I see as the greatest threats facing our nation. The reality is that the threat landscape today is diverse, dynamic, and geographically diffuse, more so than ever before. I believe the immediate focus of the IC must be directed to the geopolitical and economic impact of the coronavirus pandemic, as well as its origins. The American people deserve answers, and if confirmed, I pledge that the IC will remain laser-focused on providing them. We face enduring challenges on other fronts as well. These include China, from the race to 5G to preventing cyber espionage, Russia and its continued efforts to undermine our democracy by interfering in free and fair elections, Iran and its continued pursuit of nuclear capabilities, ballistic missiles, and sponsorship of terrorist groups, North Korea and its continued possession of nuclear weapons and delivery systems, and transnational issues like cybersecurity, safeguarding our supply chains, and of course, preventing terrorist attacks or a resurgence of ISIS. This list is by no means exhaustive. To address the full spectrum of threats and threat actors, the IC must work continuously to earn the trust of the President, the Congress, and the American people.
I can tell you that there is a significant amount of evidence that this came from that laboratory in Wuhan. Look, the best experts so far seem to think it was man-made. I have no reason to disbelieve that at this point.
Your Office of the DNI says the consensus, the scientific consensus, was not man-made or genetically modified.
That's right. I agree with that. Yeah, I've seen their analysis. I've seen the summary that you saw that was released publicly. I have no reason to doubt that that is accurate at this point.
Okay, so just to be clear, you do not think it was man-made or genetically modified?
I've seen what the Intelligence Committee has said. I have no reason to believe that they've got it wrong.